She lay broken beneath a rusted sky, skin torn, breath shallow, not a soul in sight, only flies touched her, drawn to blood and silence. She thought this was how it would end, unseen, unloved, discarded by a world that never cared, until a shadow fell across her face and a hand, warm and human, brushed the insects away. He didn't ask what she was worth, he didn't flinch at the blood, he just said, "You're not dying here. Not today. Not while I'm breathing." And in that moment, death wasn't what waited, hope did. She had stopped feeling her legs hours ago, maybe more, maybe days. Time didn't matter anymore beneath the acid-stained sky of that forsaken world where the wind sang like a scream and even the insects moved with hunger. Her body was a mess of torn skin and dried blood and the sticky buzzing weight of flies that crawled into open wounds as if claiming her before death did. Her breath was shallow, each inhale a struggle through cracked lips and a swollen throat, her voice long lost to screaming, long since silenced by pain. No one had come, no one ever would. She had been thrown from the slaver transport when the engines failed and her cage cracked. She had crawled for a time searching for anything, shelter, water, hope, but the sand burned and the rocks tore her palms and eventually her knees gave out and now she lay there half covered in ash with only the flies for company. She remembered being beautiful once, before the scars, before the cuts they carved into her thighs to mark her status, before they drugged her and painted her and dressed her in nothing but chains. Her name had been Lyra once, soft on the tongue of her mother, but she had not heard it spoken in cycles now. No one spoke her name because to the traders she had been product, to the guard she had been cargo, to the men who rented her she had been a thing. But now even they had left her for dead because a broken toy was of no use and she knew she would die here. Her fingers curled around dry earth, her breath slowed, she closed her eyes not to sleep but to fade. Death was not the worst thing that could happen, it was simply the last, and then she felt it, air shifting near her head, too large for an insect, too warm for wind, and then a voice, not cruel, not mocking, not a command but a question, "Are you still alive?" Her eyes opened or tried to, one slid halfway, blurry and bloodied. But the figure above her was real, human, tall and ragged, sun-browned skin and tired green eyes. His expression wasn't disgusted, it was stricken, as if seeing her had wounded him. He dropped to his knees, gently brushed flies from her face. His fingers were calloused but his touch was careful. She tried to speak but only a rasp escaped and his hand hovered near her lips. "Shoo, don't try to talk, not yet." He reached into a side pouch and pulled out a canister. Cool water dribbled over her lips and she gasped and drank it as if it were air. "Slowly, slowly," he murmured. Then he slid his jacket off and laid it over her, shielding her near-naked frame from the sun. When he spoke again it was softer. "I'm going to carry you now if that's okay." She didn't nod, couldn't, but he seemed to sense her consent and lifted her gently, arms under her knees and back lifting as if she weighed nothing. She expected pain but instead found warmth. He carried her across dunes and rocks to a small outpost hidden between the cliffs. A transport shelter with a medbay barely holding together. He laid her on the bed and spoke into an old calm. "Got a survivor, bad shape, female, alien, send what you can." While waiting he cleaned her wounds, not all at once, not aggressively, just gentle hands and soft cloth and antiseptic that stung less than she thought it would. When the medkit chirped he administered a stim to stabilize her pulse and she faded into blackness expecting not to wake again. But she did, hours later, maybe more, the light dimmer now. He was asleep beside her in a chair, arms folded, head bowed, as if he hadn't rested in days. She stared at him trying to understand. Why had he helped her? He didn't know her. She wasn't human. She wasn't valuable, not anymore. When he stirred and noticed her eyes open he smiled, not with triumph but relief. "You're awake. Good, thought I might have been too late." He gave her water again and a soft protein bar that she nibbled slowly, her stomach protesting but accepting. He never asked her name, never asked her story. Just told her his. His name was Jalen, former supply runner turned independent rescue pilot. He searched wrecks and ruins looking for survivors, most of whom had already been forgotten. "Why?" she asked once, her voice returning in whispers. He looked away then back at her. "Because my sister died alone in a ditch just like the one I found you in, and I couldn't save her, but maybe I can save someone else." She stared at him and something cracked open in her chest. Not fear, not sorrow, something else, recognition. He didn't see her as filth. He didn't look away from her scars. Instead he helped her sit, help her wash, fed her until she could stand on her own, never once asking for anything, never touching her without permission, never pitying, just being there, and it changed everything. Slowly her wounds closed, her hair grew back, her eyes regained clarity. She started walking the outpost halls at night, learning how to reboot comms, how to patch wiring. He taught her gently without condescension. When she fixed the power relay on her own he clapped once and said with a grin, "Brilliant," and she flushed warm in places she thought had died. One evening he brought her outside to the cliff's edge. "See that, that's the Coven Nebula. My sister used to tell me stars were just holes poked in the curtain of the world to remind us there's something else." Lyra looked up and for the first time in what felt like forever, she believed it. He let her stay, never asking when she'd leave, never suggesting she should. He gave her a room, a nameplate, tools, and trust. And slowly the hollow place in her heart began to fill. One night she asked, "Do you think I'm ruined?" and his expression turned fierce. "You were never ruined, Not for a second. You were hurt but not broken, there's a difference. He reached for her hand then stopped, waiting. She placed her fingers in his and he squeezed just once. Warm, reassuring, real. From then on they worked side by side, helping others, finding the forgotten, bringing them home. She became his partner. Not just in repairs and rescues but in everything. When people looked at her now they saw strength, not shame, because Jalen had shown her how to reclaim herself. He never made her feel small, never acted like he owned her. He just stayed. When the first rain fell on the outpost in months, she ran outside and let it soak her, laughing, and he came out and joined her, and they danced barefoot in the mud and it was ridiculous and perfect. When she kissed him, tentative, hopeful, he kissed her back like she mattered, like she had always mattered and always would, and in that kiss was a vow no words could contain. I see you, I choose you, I will never look away. And Lyra, once abandoned, once written off as a body for sale, stood in his arms not as a victim but as a survivor, as a woman, as a soul who had found not just safety, but love, and that changed everything. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm that neither of them tried to break. Lyra woke to the soft hum of Jalen's voice as he calibrated ancient scanners and patched failing systems. He always left something small for her each morning on the table. Sometimes fruit, sometimes a tool she'd admired, sometimes just a note that said I'm glad you're still here, and each gesture made her chest ache in a way that wasn't pain but something deeper, something healing. She began rising before him just to watch him sleep slouched in that old chair, still wearing the same patched coat from the day he'd found her. He had saved her life without asking for anything, and now every moment with him made her feel like she was saving herself. She trained with him daily, learning how to fly the smaller scoutcraft, how to use the comm frequencies, how to speak in codes and read star charts. She was sharp, faster than she expected, strong in ways that surprised even him, and she noticed the way his eyes lingered on her now, not in hunger but in awe, as if he couldn't believe how far she'd come, and she couldn't believe it either sometimes. When they ventured to neighboring outposts together, she kept close, at first wary of wandering eyes, but it was Jalen's presence, his silent reassurance, that kept her steady. He never stepped ahead of her, never shielded her from view. He walked beside her always, and when traders or workers stared too long, he would look them in the eye with a warning so quiet, so clear that not a single hand dared reach for her. She felt safe, respected, seen, and for the first time in her life she believed she had a right to exist beyond what her body could offer. She had skills now, a purpose, a voice that people listened to, and a partner who treated her like she mattered more than any cargo or command. One evening she returned from a solo repair run, her jumpsuit stained with grease and dust, and found Jalen outside the outpost beneath a sky streaked with red and gold from the twin setting suns. He was standing still, hands in his pockets, looking out at the horizon, and she walked up beside him, silently waiting. He turned slowly and his expression shifted from thought to warmth, and then something deeper, something quiet and full of weight. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, his fingers trembling just slightly. I never thought, he said slowly, that I'd meet someone like you out here. That I'd find someone who'd take all my ghosts and make them feel small. She swallowed, her breath catching in her throat. You don't have to say anything, she whispered, but he shook his head. I want to, I need to. You're not just someone I helped. You're not some passing light in the dark. You are the only thing that's ever made this life feel like more than survival. Her hands found his and held them tight, and she leaned her forehead against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart. You make me feel whole, she whispered back. You remind me that I'm not what they did to me, I'm what I choose to become, and I choose this, I choose you. He tilted her chin up and kissed her slow and deep, not with desperation but with reverence, and it felt like a promise carved into the stars. After that everything changed, but nothing felt forced. They still worked, still repaired, still rescued, but they did it together, as equals, as partners, as something more. They upgraded the outpost, turned it into a haven for the broken and the lost, and word began to spread that if you were injured, or hunted, or forgotten, there was a place you could go where kindness still lived. Lyra began teaching others like her how to fight, how to fly, how to believe in their own worth again, and she never once let them forget that they were more than what had been done to them. Jalen watched her with pride, his heart growing fuller with every soul she helped and every day they spent building something new. Then one night, during a storm that rolled in from the southern range with winds like thunder and rain like tears, he knelt on the hangar floor and pulled out a ring forged from salvaged alloy and inlaid with a single crystal. He didn't ask for ownership, didn't demand vows. He just said, I want to wake up beside you for the rest of my life. I want to grow old in this place we made and know that every time I look at you I'm looking at the strongest person I've ever known. She dropped to her knees in front of him and kissed him and nodded because words weren't enough, and in that moment the storm outside quieted as if the sky itself had heard their promise. In time they expanded their home, brought in others who shared their vision, humans and aliens, orphans and outcasts, all of them woven into the fabric of something that felt like family. Lyra led missions into slave routes, dismantling networks, freeing those still trapped, and she never forgot where she came from. Never stopped returning to the place Jalen had found her to sit quietly and remember the girl she used to be and thank the universe that someone had cared enough to stop, to reach down, to lift her from the dirt and into the light. On the anniversary of her rescue, Jalen took her back to the exact spot where the flies had gathered and the wind had howled, and they stood there in silence, letting the memory live without pain. She looked at him and whispered, I don't know why you stopped for me, and he smiled, because I saw you. lying there broken and alone, and something inside me knew that if I left you there I'd never forgive myself. But more than that, he cupped her face. I think I needed you as much as you needed me, and she believed him because love was no longer something she feared, it was something she lived. And that night beneath a sky so full of stars it looked like it might burst, they danced with bare feet on the cliff's edge and held each other with the knowledge that they had turned tragedy into triumph, pain into power, and loneliness into a love that would echo through every soul they touched and every heart they healed. Together, and that was how it ended, not in fire or sorrow, but in hope, in strength, in the simple miracle of one man who knelt down beside a dying girl and chose to lift her up instead of walking away.